Piper! Piper! Elise Laurent pushed her wheelchair across the slick, rain-soaked wooden path, the salty sea wind slashing against her face like icy blades. Her hands trembled, not only from the cold, but from the suffocating fear tightening in her chest. Her hoarse cry was swallowed by the roar of waves crashing against the rocky shore. December at Eastern Promenade was already treacherous, but for a disabled woman desperately searching for her 6-year-old child in a shroud of dense fog, it was nothing short of a nightmare. Her legs no longer held any feeling, but the crushing pain in her chest, where her heart was breaking at the thought of losing Piper, pulsed with every second. And then she saw it. A tiny red coat, hunched at the edge of the rocks, only a few feet from the churning whirl of water below. Elise didn't think. She simply acted. She hurled herself from the wheelchair, crawling across the frozen boards, knees burning as they scraped against the rough planks, her hands clinging to every gap to drag her body forward. Piper, sweetheart, it's Mommy. When her arms finally wrapped around the small, trembling body, when Piper's sobs burst against her shoulder, in that moment, Elise Laurent, who for an entire year had not dared believe she was worthy of being anyone's mother, finally understood. Love does not need legs to run. It only needs a heart brave enough to stay. But this story, it does not begin in that moment. It begins 6 months earlier, on the first snowy night of winter, with a desperate young woman and an old wheelchair abandoned beneath an ancient pine tree, and with a widowed man who had long lost faith in miracles, until the night she appeared. Now, let me tell you the story, from the very beginning. Snow in Maine is unlike anywhere else. It doesn't fall gently like in the movies, but heavy, wet, clinging to everything as if to remind you. Winter here is anything but kind. That night was December 23rd. Julian Hart drove his black SUV through the deserted streets of Portland, Maine. In the back seat, his 6-year-old daughter, Piper, clutched her stuffed rabbit, nibbling on a gingerbread cookie while softly humming. "Daddy," her little voice piped up, "why is the road jammed?" Julian glanced in the rearview mirror, answering gently, "There's an accident, sweetheart. Daddy will take another route." He turned the wheel, guiding the car onto a narrow road along Casco Bay, where few people passed. The ocean wind swept in, carrying with it the salt and biting chill of the Atlantic. Suddenly, Piper cried out, "Daddy, stop the car!" Julian startled. "What is it, honey?" There's someone," she pointed out the window. Julian hit the brakes. He squinted through the thick curtain of snow. And then he saw. Under an old pine tree, right at the rocky shore, sat a figure motionless in a battered wheelchair. Long blonde hair hung down over her shoulders, drenched with snow. Her hands clutched a torn paper bag, a worn brown leather suitcase beside her. Her shoulders shook in spasms, not from the cold, but from crying. Julian gripped the steering wheel tighter. A warning rang in his mind. "Don't get involved. This is Portland, not a Hallmark movie. She could be dangerous, an addict, or—" "Daddy." Piper's voice pulled him back. Her wide eyes looked up at him, full of sorrow. She doesn't have a home, does she?" Julian didn't answer, but he knew his daughter was right. "Daddy," Piper whispered, "if Mommy were still here, she would help her, wouldn't she?" The words cut straight through his chest like a blade. Claire, his wife, had died 2 years earlier in a car accident. She had always been the one to stop for strangers, to hand food to the homeless, to believe in the good in people. But Julian, since losing her, he had locked his heart away. Yet Today, he exhaled heavily, opened the car door, and stepped out. Snow kept falling hard. Julian walked closer. The woman jerked her head up, pale blue eyes, a pallid face, lips turning purple from the cold. "Excuse me," Julian spoke softly, careful not to scare her. "You can't stay here. It'll be dark soon." She said nothing, only hugged the paper bag tighter. Julian didn't ask her name, didn't ask why. He only said, "I don't need to know what you've been through, but I can't leave you out here overnight." Silent tears slid down her cheeks. Suddenly, from behind, a small hand touched the woman's shoulder. Piper. The little girl had opened the car door herself, running into the snow. Now she stood there, wrapping her red wool scarf around the stranger's shoulders. "Miss," Piper whispered, "I think Mommy sent you to us." The woman trembled. Her lips moved, but no words came. Then she collapsed forward, sobbing uncontrollably. Julian didn't hesitate. He bent down, lifting her into his arms. Her body was frighteningly light, as if she hadn't eaten in days. He placed her inside the car. Piper had already climbed up beside her, clutching the woman's icy hand. "You'll stay with us, right?" Piper asked, her eyes glistening. The woman looked at her, and slowly nodded. Julian got back behind the wheel, started the engine. As the SUV rolled carefully over the snow, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Piper was holding the stranger's hand, smiling, and the woman's eyes, for the first time in the darkness, no longer held despair. Julian Hart did not know. The woman he had just brought home was named Elise Laurent. She had once been an art teacher in Burlington, Vermont. Once had big dreams. Once was cherished and loved. Until a year ago, when a runaway truck veered onto the sidewalk. Elise had pushed a student out of the way in time, but lost her own legs. Since then, everything collapsed. She lost her job, lost her boyfriend, lost her mother to a stroke, lost herself entirely. That night, she had sat beneath that old pine tree, ready to let the cold finish everything. But then, a small hand touched her shoulder. A warm voice said, "Come home with me." And Elise Laurent, who thought she had lost it all, suddenly realized, sometimes miracles are not radiant beams from heaven. They come in the form of a 6-year-old girl with a red wool scarf and a smile of absolute trust. Elise woke up in an unfamiliar room. Morning light filtered through cream-colored curtains, falling across the thick blanket covering her. In the air lingered the scent of pine wood and cinnamon. In the corner, the fireplace still flickered with a small flame. She sat bolt upright, alarmed. Where am I? Memory rushed back like a wave. The old pine tree, the furious snowstorm, the man, the little girl, the red wool scarf. Elise panted, trembling hands clutching the edge of the blanket. Her eyes darted around. A spacious, tidy room, oak bookshelves, a seascape painting hanging on the wall, a window opening onto a garden blanketed in snow. Not a hospital, not a shelter. This was a real home. Then the door swung open. "You're awake!" Piper burst in like a gust of wind, arms flung wide, hugging Elise tightly before she could react. A clumsy yet firm embrace, brimming with the energy of a 6-year-old child. Elise stiffened. It had been so long since anyone had held her like that. "I knew it," Piper whispered into her shoulder. "I knew you were a snow angel." "Daddy said you just needed to rest." Elise couldn't find words. She simply let the girl hold her, and somewhere deep in her chest, a small crack began to open. "Piper, don't bother her." A warm baritone voice came from the doorway. Julian Hart stepped in, carrying a tray with hot tea and a bowl of soup. He wore a gray sweater, plain jeans, his face serious, but his brown eyes unusually gentle. He set the tray on the bedside table, gently drawing Piper back. "She needs to rest, honey." Piper pouted, but obeyed, stepping back, her eyes still shining as they watched Elise. Julian turned to Elise. Their eyes met, lingering for a moment before he spoke. "You're safe here. No one will ask you anything until you're ready." Elise swallowed hard. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Julian pulled a folded note from his pocket, placing it on the edge of the bed. "If you need quiet, I'll give you quiet. But if you need a place to start over, there's always room here for you." With that, he took Piper's hand, led her out, and the door clicked softly shut. Elise sat motionless for a long time. At last, she opened the note. Neat, careful handwriting. "If you need silence, I will give you silence. But if you need a place to start over, there's always a place here for you. J." The words blurred through her tears. Elise pressed the paper to her chest and sobbed, not from sorrow, but because for the first time in a long year, she no longer felt completely alone. The first 3 days passed slowly, as if following a different rhythm. Elise spoke hardly at all. She moved between the living room and her bedroom, trying to shrink herself so as not to take up space. She refused to sit at the table, eating only in her room, quiet as though apologizing for her very presence. But Piper would not let her disappear. The girl followed her step for step, drawing pictures, telling stories, singing off-key songs. Piper showed no fear of the wheelchair, never asked why, never looked with pity. To her, Elise was simply a new friend. On the 4th morning, Julian was in the kitchen brewing coffee when he heard the faint roll of wheelchair wheels on the wooden floor. Elise appeared at the doorway. Her blonde hair was tied back. She wore an oversized sweater, perhaps Julian's, and looked so small. Her pale blue eyes were still hesitant. "Good morning," Julian said softly, not turning immediately so she wouldn't feel pressured. "Morning." Elise's voice was hoarse, as if unused for a long time. "Coffee?" She hesitated, then nodded. Julian poured a cup, set it on the table. Elise wheeled closer, stopping a few feet away, lifting the cup with both hands as if clinging to its warmth. They sat in silence. Only the sound of snow falling outside the window, the crackle of firewood in the hearth, and Piper whispering to her stuffed rabbit in the next room. Elise asked quietly, her voice so small it might shatter the air, "Why did you help me?" Julian paused, staring into his cup. "Because my daughter believes good people deserve help. You don't know if I'm good." "I don't need to know." Julian looked up, meeting her eyes. "I just know. No one deserves to die alone in the snow." The words hung in the kitchen air. Elise bit her lip. She wondered if he realized, that night, she truly hadn't planned to survive. "I'll leave as soon as the snow melts," she whispered. Julian didn't argue, only nodded. "If that's what you want." But both of them knew. Maine's snow does not melt easily. Piper burst into the room, tugging at Elise's hand. "You have to eat with us! Daddy cooks so good!" Elise meant to refuse, but she couldn't resist the sparkle in the girl's eyes and the small hand tugging hers. In the dining room, Julian was setting out food: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, steamed carrots. But Elise immediately noticed something else. The table had been raised. Small wooden blocks propped under its legs, just enough for the wheelchair to fit. Extra chairs pushed aside, no obstacles left. Julian said nothing. He simply pulled out Piper's chair, then turned to Elise with a slight nod. She rolled into place. Perfect fit, natural, as if She belonged there. Elise looked up at him. He didn't look back, just ladled soup for his daughter, chatting casually as if nothing unusual had been done. But Elise knew. He had done it himself, alone, in silence, without needing thanks. And for the first time in months, Elise felt she was not a burden. That night, she did not cry. Lying in the dark, listening to the distant ocean wind, she whispered to herself, Maybe I can stay a little longer. But Elise had no idea. During those 3 days, Julian too was changing. He sat in his study, looking at the wedding photo with Claire, and for the first time, he did not feel guilty realizing that his heart could still beat again. Day 10. Elise was beginning to grow used to the rhythm of life in this house, used to the sound of Piper's giggles every morning, used to the smell of Julian's coffee brewing steadily at 6 o'clock, even used to the way his eyes would glance at her. Not quite looking, just a flicker of concern before turning away again. Today the sky was clear, thin clouds drifting. The snow had eased, though the wind off Casco Bay still blew sharp and cold. Julian had to attend a partner meeting in downtown Portland. Standing at the door, adjusting his tie, he looked at Piper, who sat cross-legged on the carpet, drawing a picture of a red and white lighthouse. "Be good, honey. Daddy will be back before lunch." Piper nodded, eyes still fixed on her drawing. Julian turned to Elise, who sat by the window with an old book in her hands. "Could you keep an eye on Piper for me?" Elise froze, looking up. I'm not sure." "You only need to be here," Julian replied gently. "She's very well behaved." "You don't have to do anything," Elise hesitated, then nodded. Julian smiled, a small, rare smile, before stepping out the door. 1 hour later, Elise and Piper sat by the fireplace. Piper was teaching her to fold paper flowers. "You fold it this way, then flip it. Like this." The little girl raised a slightly crooked flower, her face glowing with pride. Elise laughed, a natural, genuine laugh, the first in a very long time. "You're so good at this. I can't make mine look nearly as nice. That's okay. Everything you make is beautiful." Elise blinked, surprised. "How do you know that?" Piper said seriously. "Because of your eyes. They look like the eyes of an artist, just like my mom's." The words silenced Elise. "Your mom? She painted too?" Piper nodded. "She painted beautifully. The ocean, the lighthouse, even me." She pointed to the watercolor hanging on the wall, a little girl standing on the shore, holding a kite string. Elise stared at it for a long time. The strokes were soft, the colors tender, brimming with love. "Your mom was very gifted." "Yeah," Piper gave a faint smile. "But she's gone. 2 years now." An accident, Elise's throat tightened. "I'm so sorry." "It's okay," Piper answered softly, her eyes pure. "Daddy says Mommy still watches me from heaven, and I think she sent you to me." Elise didn't reply. She simply squeezed the small hand in hers. Piper smiled, then suddenly exclaimed, "Elise! I want to see the snow in the garden. Come with me." "Honey, it's so cold outside. Let's just stay." But Piper had already darted to the back door. "Piper! Put on your coat first," Elise called after her. No reply. 5 minutes later, Elise checked the clock. Called again. "Piper?" No answer. Her heart clenched. She wheeled herself quickly to the back door. The garden was empty. "Piper, where are you?" The sea wind howled, snatching her voice away. Elise struggled to push her chair down the wooden steps. There was no ramp, but she didn't care. She propelled herself into the snow, shouting into the blur, "Piper!" Still no answer. Her eyes scanned the garden, stopping at the path leading down to Eastern Promenade, the coastal walkway. The girl couldn't possibly have gone that far, but Elise knew Piper's curious, adventurous spirit. She gritted her teeth, driving the wheelchair harder. The wheels sank into wet snow. Her hands ached, breath turning to white mist. "Piper, where are you?" Then she heard it, a small sob, from the path. Eastern Promenade. Elise pushed her chair down the wooden slope, slick with melting snow. The wheels tilted, nearly throwing her off, but she clung on, forcing herself forward. The sea wind whipped her face raw, cold as knives. Snow clumped in her hair. Her fingers went numb, but she did not stop. "Piper!" Then she saw it. A tiny red coat huddled at the edge of the rocks, only a few feet from the crashing waves below. Piper. The girl was curled up, knees to chest, sobbing. Elise didn't think. She threw herself from the chair. Her legs were useless, but her arms still had strength. She crawled. Across the rough, frozen boards, knees burning, hands scraped raw and bleeding. But she pushed on. "Piper, Mommy's here. Mommy's here." The word Mommy slipped out before she realized it. Piper looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Elise! I got lost. I was scared." Elise wrapped the child in her arms, clutching her tight, as if afraid the wind would carry her away. "You're okay now. You're safe. I'm here." Piper buried her face into Elise's shoulder, sobbing hard. Elise kissed her tangled hair, her own tears mixing with snow and wind. "I'll never let you be lost. I promise." Julian came home earlier than expected. The meeting had ended quickly. Stepping inside, he called out, "Piper? Elise?" Silence. He ran into the garden. Empty. Then he saw the wheelchair abandoned by the path, his chest seized. Julian sprinted down to Eastern Promenade, and he saw Elise, clothes drenched, clutching Piper tightly in her arms, both of them shivering, hair plastered wet. But Piper was safe. He dropped to his knees, wrapping them both in his arms. "What happened? Are you two all right?" Elise looked up, her eyes red, lips purple from cold, but her voice steady. She got lost. But I found her. I found her." Julian stared at her. Something burst open in his chest. Not just emotion, not pity, respect, admiration, and love. He held them tighter, voice breaking. "Thank you. Thank you." That night, after hot baths, after ginger tea, Piper fell asleep in Elise's arms on the sofa. Julian draped a blanket over them both, then sat opposite, silently watching. Elise was still awake, eyes weary, yet peaceful. "You know," she whispered, "today, for the first time in a year, I didn't think about my legs. I only thought about her." Julian nodded slowly. "And today," his voice low, warm, "I realized my daughter doesn't need someone perfect. She just needs someone who loves enough to dare do the impossible." Elise looked up at him. Their eyes met. No words needed. And that night, as the fire roared in the hearth, in that small house by the Maine coast, 3 souls, each scarred by loss, grief, and loneliness, began to become a family. But the story did not end there. For true love is not found only in moments of heroism, but in ordinary days. Simple dinners, small smiles, and wounds still healing. 3 weeks passed. Elise was no longer the stranger in the house. She had her own spot at the dining table, read bedtime stories to Piper every night, folded laundry, rearranged the spice cabinet, even started cooking. Only simple dishes. But Julian always finished them and said, Much better than I expected. And yet, inside, she remained a tangle of emotions she could not unravel. Every night Elise lay awake staring at the ceiling, asking herself, "Do I deserve this happiness?" And the question clung to her. How long before they realize I'm only a burden? One evening, after Piper was asleep, Julian sat in his study, flipping through documents for a new project. His eyes scanned the pages, but his mind lingered on Elise, on the way she laughed at Piper's silly antics, on her habit of biting her lip when she drew, on the faraway look in her eyes whenever she gazed out the window. He wanted to ask, to understand, but he didn't want to push. The faint sound of wheels rolled in the hallway. Elise stopped at the doorway, holding a cup of tea. "You're still awake?" Julian nodded. "So are you." She rolled in, sitting across from him. The room was quiet, except for the crackle of the fireplace. Elise spoke softly. "That snowy night. You didn't ask me why I was out there. You didn't ask anything else. But I think you deserve to know." Julian set his pen down, looked at her. He didn't interrupt. He simply listened. Elise took a deep breath. "I used to be an art teacher in Burlington, Vermont. Public school, poor kids. Many had never owned proper colored pencils. I started a mural project to help them believe life wasn't only gray." She paused, staring down at the rim of her cup. "A year ago, Mateo, an 8-year-old boy, was standing at the curb after school. A truck lost control and veered toward him. I saw. I pushed him out of the way. But I didn't escape in time." Her voice trembled. "I woke up in the hospital. No feeling in my legs. The doctor said I would never walk the same again." Julian exhaled quietly. "My boyfriend then, David, stayed for 2 months. Then he said he couldn't continue, that I was no longer the woman he had loved." Tears slipped down Elise's cheeks. "I lost my job. Schools were reluctant to hire a teacher in a wheelchair. My mother, frail, living alone, had a stroke from worrying about me. She died 3 months later, in the hospital, and I didn't even make it in time." She wiped her tears, forcing a smile. "I lost everything. My legs, my work, my boyfriend, my mother. In the end, I lost myself. I no longer knew who I was, just some useless obstacle." Elise lifted her gaze straight into Julian's. "The night you found me, I had already decided to sit under that pine tree and let the cold finish the rest." Julian was silent. He rose, stepped forward, and knelt before her. "Elise," she shook her head, "you don't have to say anything. I just want you to understand why I can't believe I deserve to be here, why I keep fearing the day you realize you were wrong." Julian took her hand, warm and firm. "Listen to me. I didn't bring you here out of pity. I didn't keep you because of duty. I did it because, since you came, this house has come alive." Piper laughs more. "And I do too." He looked deep into her eyes. "You're not a burden. You're a gift." Elise broke down in tears. This time, not from pain. This time, she believed. The next morning dawned bright with sunshine. Julian brewed coffee. Piper drew. Elise sat by the window with a book. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Julian opened the door. Standing there was a tall woman with long brown hair, a black leather coat, Gucci sunglasses, and a cold, confident smile. "Hello, Julian." Julian froze. Margaret. Margaret Whitmore, Claire's sister, his late wife's elder sibling. She walked in like she owned the place, pulling off her gloves, glancing around. "The house looks the same. Except it smells different." She frowned. Someone else living here? Elise rolled out, stopping when she saw the stranger. Margaret's eyes swept from Elise's blonde hair down to the wheelchair. Her smile thinned, icy. Ah, I see Julian stepped in quickly. Margaret, what are you doing here? I heard the news. Margaret removed her sunglasses, staring him down. News that you withdrew from the company, refused an $80 million deal. And now, you're living with a stranger. The word stranger cut like a blade. Elise felt herself shrink, wishing she could vanish. My life is my business, Julian said coldly. Not exactly, Margaret smirked. Not when it affects my niece. Piper is Claire's blood. I can't sit by while you let a stranger ruin her. What are you saying? Julian's voice tightened. I'm saying that if you don't come to your senses, I'll petition for custody of Piper. The air froze solid. Elise felt as though her chest had been struck. Julian stepped closer, his voice shaking with anger. Try it, if you dare. Margaret didn't flinch. You think a court will believe a single father living with a disabled woman of unknown background over the child's aunt with money, status, and the ability to give Piper the best life? She turned to Elise, her smile razor-sharp. It's not your fault. It's just, you don't belong here. She spun toward the door, tossing one final line. 3 days. I'll give you 3 days to think. Then I'm calling my lawyer. The door slammed shut. Julian stood frozen, fists clenched. Elise sat motionless, face pale. Piper ran in from her room, hugging her father's legs. Daddy, what did Aunt Margaret say? Why are you angry? Julian hugged her, kissing her hair. It's nothing, sweetheart. Daddy's fine. But he wasn't fine. Elise wheeled silently back to her room, closing the door. That night, Julian knocked. No answer. Elise, will you open the door? At last, the door creaked open. Elise sat by the bed, eyes red and swollen. You have to let me go. Julian stood firm. No. Don't you see? Her voice broke, tears streaming. I'm the problem. If I weren't here, she wouldn't have threatened you. Piper wouldn't be dragged into this. Elise, do you think I want this? I don't. But I can't. I can't let you lose your daughter because of me. Julian stepped forward, placing his hand on her shoulder. The one causing trouble is Margaret, not you. I won't let her take Piper, and I won't let her drive you out. But no buts. Julian knelt, meeting her eyes. I lost my wife, and the guilt still haunts me. I blame myself every day, wishing I had been there. I regret it every single day, his voice cracked. This time, I will not repeat my mistake. I will fight. For Piper. For you. For us. Elise sobbed, and Julian pulled her into his arms. You're not alone anymore. You have me. And for the first time, Elise allowed herself to be weak. Allowed herself to lean on someone else. 2 days after the confrontation with Margaret, Julian had barely slept. He met with lawyers, reviewed every option, prepared the files. He knew Margaret wasn't bluffing. She had money, connections, and most importantly, a motive to protect her sister's legacy. That night, sitting in his study and looking at the wedding photo with Claire, he murmured, Claire, am I doing the right thing? Are you angry with me? Because my heart is stirring again? Silence wrapped the room. But inside Julian, one thing was clear. Claire would not want him to live forever in grief. She would want him happy. And Piper would too. The next morning, Elise woke very early. She couldn't sleep, kept thinking about the line Margaret had thrown at her. You don't belong here. Was that true? She looked around the room. The books Julian had bought, the red wool scarf Piper had given her. The small painting hanging by the bed. 3 people standing beneath a lighthouse. Family. But was she truly a part of it? The house was empty. Julian had taken Piper to school. Elise rolled into the study. The door was ajar, and she saw a file folder left open. Legal paperwork titled Petition for Guardianship. Margaret Whitmore versus. Julian Hart below. It was an email from the attorney. Julian, I have to be frank. Margaret has the advantage. Solid finances, a stable environment. The fact that you are living with someone of unknown background, without employment, and with a particular health condition, the court may deem that an unsuitable environment for a child. Elise finished reading and felt her heart stop. Because of me, I am the obstacle. She rolled back to her room, opened a drawer, took out the old bag, and began to pack. When Julian came home, he stepped in carrying takeout. Elise? I bought pho. My Vietnamese friend swears this place is great. He froze. Elise was sitting in the living room. Beside her, the bag was neatly packed. Her face was calm, but her eyes were red. Julian set the food down, his voice low. What are you planning to do? You know what I have to do. No. Julian stepped closer. You are not leaving. Julian. Elise shook her head, her voice trembling. I read the lawyer's email. I know I'm the problem. If I leave, Margaret loses her pretext to sue. Piper will stay with you. And you? Where will you go? Elise was silent, because she had no answer. Julian knelt before her and took both her hands. Do you think I'll be happy if you leave? Do you think Piper will be okay? She'll forget me. She's just a little girl. No. For the first time, his voice rose. She won't forget. Do you know? Last night, she drew a picture. 3 people. Me, her, and you. She called it My New Family, and she asked me when you would officially become her mother. Elise burst into tears. Don't say that. Julian embraced her, his voice breaking. I lost Claire to illness. I couldn't save her. But this time, I can save this. I will not let you go. I'll fight Margaret. I'll prove that. We are a family. A real family. Elise trembled in his arms. What if you lose? Julian pulled back and looked straight into her eyes. Then at least I fought. This time, I won't surrender. 3 days later, Julian drove south out of Portland alone. Burlington, Vermont. 5 hours without stopping. The old school where Elise had taught, peeling red brick walls, a broad playground in need of care. He met the principal and asked about the mural. Ah, Ms. Laurent's mural, she sighed. It's still there, but the colors have faded badly. No one's maintained it. The kids have even scribbled over it. It's a shame Julian stood before the wall. The small handprints still became butterflies lifting off. Colors once vivid were now dulled, one corner marred with graffiti. Yet he still saw the beauty, still felt the love Elise had poured into it. He took photos, then made a call. I need a professional restoration team. Earliest possible. Restore it exactly as original. Cost is not an issue. 2 weeks later, Julian asked Elise to go for a stroll. He didn't say where, only, come with me. The car stopped in front of the old school in Burlington. Elise went still. This is, come see. Julian opened the door, wheeled her around to the back of the building. And when Elise saw the wall, her breath caught. The mural had been fully restored. The colors blazed like the first day. The handprints, the butterflies, all returned. In the lower corner, a small brass plaque read, "A heart that painted children's dreams, Ms. Elise Laurent." Elise covered her face, sobbing. Why? Why would you do this? Julian knelt beside her. Because I want you to remember. You are not useless. You brought color to those kids. You changed their lives. And now, you are changing ours. He took her hand. You don't need to prove your worth. You had worth. Before you met me. Before the accident. You have always been Elise Laurent. Brave, talented, full of love. Elise collapsed against his shoulder, weeping. No longer from sorrow, but because, for the first time, she saw herself through someone else's eyes. And she saw a person worthy of love. A week later, Margaret filed the petition with the court. The first hearing took place. She wore an elegant black suit, sat beside her lawyer, utterly confident. Julian sat at the opposite table. Beside him was Elise, her first time appearing publicly in this role. Margaret's attorney began, Your Honor, Mr. Julian Hart is cohabiting with a woman of unknown background, without stable employment, and with a particular health condition. We contend that this is not an appropriate environment in which to raise a 6-year-old girl. The judge reviewed the file, then looked up. Mr. Hart, do you wish to respond? Julian stood, calm but resolute. Your Honor, this is Ms. Elise Laurent, a former art teacher who sacrificed the use of her legs to save a student. She has endured loss and pain, yet continues to choose love. And my daughter, Piper, has been transformed since meeting her. He placed a folder on the bench. Letters from her former principal, from parents, and from Matteo himself, the child she saved. The judge flipped through them. The courtroom fell silent. Julian went on, opening a small notebook. And this is Piper's journal. He read the last page. Today, Miss Elise taught me to paint butterflies. She said, butterflies can fly because they aren't afraid of the sky. I think Miss Elise is like a butterfly. She doesn't need legs to fly. She flies with her heart. I love her. I want her to be my mom. The room was pin-drop quiet. Margaret bit her lip. The judge looked at Julian, then turned to Elise. Ms. Laurent, do you wish to say anything? Elise lifted her head. Her hands still trembled, but her voice was clear. Your Honor, I am not perfect. I still have wounds that haven't healed, but I love Piper, and I will spend my life protecting her. She paused, then met the judge's gaze. I do not need legs in order to love someone. The trial dragged on for another 2 hours. Margaret's lawyer threw out every possible argument. Unstable finances. Julian had just turned down a major deal. Unsteady lifestyle, cohabiting with a stranger, potential psychological risk for the child. Would Piper be harmed if her stepmother was disabled? But Julian's attorney countered each point. He submitted financial records. Still solid. A psychologist's report. Piper was happier than ever, and most importantly, he requested that Piper be allowed to speak. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Very well. But in a private room. Only myself and the child psychologist present. 30 minutes later, Piper emerged, hand in hand with the judge. Her face was bright, not the least bit afraid. The judge returned to his bench, reviewed his notes, then looked up. After speaking with young Piper Hart, I have several observations. The room held its breath. She spoke of her life at home, about Ms. Laurent reading her bedtime stories every night, teaching her to paint, and rushing out into the freezing wind to find her when she was lost. He paused for a beat. She also said something that I believe everyone here should hear. He opened the notebook and read aloud. Miss Elise cannot walk, but she ran to save me. That is what a real mother is. Not the legs, but the heart. Margaret lowered her face. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. I will issue a final ruling in 2 weeks. But at this time, I see no reason to alter custody. Mr. Hart remains the legal guardian of Piper. Court is adjourned. Julian exhaled with relief. Elise covered her face, weeping. Margaret stood, walking silently out of the courtroom. Julian hugged Piper tightly. You did wonderfully, sweetheart. Piper beamed. I just told the truth, Daddy. She ran to Elise, throwing her arms around her. Now you won't leave, right? Elise kissed her tangled hair, tears still clinging to her lashes. No. I won't go anywhere, Piper squealed, tugging both their hands. Then let's go home. I'm hungry. 2 weeks later, the judge declared custody would remain with Julian Hart. Margaret lacked sufficient grounds to prove Piper's current environment was harmful. On the contrary, all evidence showed the child was thriving both physically and emotionally. Before leaving court, Margaret paused in front of Elise. You've won. Her voice was cold, but no longer razor-sharp. But don't forget, Piper is my sister's blood. If anything ever happens to her, Elise met her eyes squarely. I will protect that child with my life. Margaret faltered for a second, then turned and walked away. A month later, Elise began a rehabilitation program at Maine Medical Center. Julian had found the best specialists, but never pressured her. You don't have to prove anything, he said. Whether you walk again or not, you're still you. And I still love you. For the first time, he said the word love. Elise flushed, smiling. That's the first time you've said it. Because now I'm sure. Julian squeezed her hand. The physical therapy room was filled with natural light. Elise sat in her wheelchair, staring at the parallel bars stretching the length of the room. Her therapist, Sarah, smiled. We'll start very slow. No rush. You just need to trust your body. Elise nodded, though fear rippled inside her. What if it doesn't work? What if my body won't respond? Sarah seemed to read her thoughts. Elise, listen to me. This doesn't define your worth. You've already been so brave. Now we're just exploring what your body can still do. Elise drew a deep breath, stood, gripping the bars tightly. Sarah supported her from behind. Put your weight on your arms. Slowly. 1, 2. Her legs trembled faintly. Not much sensation, but something. Now, try lifting your right leg. Just a little. Elise bit her lip, summoning all her strength. And her foot shifted. Only a few millimeters, but it moved. Elise gasped. I felt it. That's right. Sarah's smile shone. Your body is responding. We'll work every day, slowly. Do you see? You can do this. Tears streamed down Elise's cheeks. This time, tears of hope. 3 months later, Elise went to therapy every day. Pain, fatigue, moments when she wanted to give up. But every evening when she came home, Piper dashed to greet her. How was it today? Did you get better? Julian was always there, massaging her legs, encouraging her, never pressuring. One night, Elise nearly collapsed in frustration. Why is my body so slow? Why can't it be faster? Julian wrapped her in his arms. Because this isn't a race. It's a journey. And whether you walk again or not, I'm here. Forever, Elise wept against his chest. For the first time, she truly believed in the word forever. 6 months later, Piper's 7th birthday. Julian threw a small party at home. A few of Piper's friends, a few neighbors, and most unexpectedly, Matteo, the boy Elise had saved a year ago. She hadn't known Julian had arranged it. The moment Matteo saw her, he ran to her and clung tight, sobbing. "Miss Laurent, you're okay? I missed you so much." Elise hugged him, kissing his head. "I missed you too, Matteo." So much Matteo's mother, a Mexican woman, took Elise's hand, her voice tinged with Spanish lilt. "Thank you. Thank you for giving my son the chance to live. And now, I see you are living again too." "Yes?" Elise nodded, too moved for words. That afternoon, after the guests had gone, Piper pulled Elise into the garden. "Elise, I have a present for you." "A present? But today is your birthday, not mine." Piper giggled mischievously. "But this is for both of us." She handed Elise a folded piece of paper. Elise opened it, a hand-drawn picture, 3 figures standing on the beach beneath a sunset. Julian, Piper, and Elise, all 3 holding hands. Beneath it, in Piper's uneven handwriting, "My family." Elise clutched the child, bursting into tears. Julian stepped out, kneeling beside them, wrapping his arms around both. He said nothing, just held them. And in that moment, beneath the Portland, Maine sunset, 3 hearts once broken, beat together as one. 9 months. 9 months since that first snowy night. 9 months since Julian met Elise beneath the old pine tree. 9 months, and everything had changed. Except for one thing. Elise still could not fully walk. She could stand, take a few steps with crutches, but not freely, not truly fly. And today, exactly 1 year since the accident that had taken her legs, Elise decided to do something special. Sarah, her therapist, stood beside her, watching. "Are you sure?" "This is a big step," Elise nodded, her blue eyes shining with resolve. "I'm ready." Sarah glanced at Julian, standing in the corner, fists clenched. He was worried, but he believed in Elise. "All right," Sarah said. "We'll try. No crutches, no parallel bars. Just you and your will." Elise sat in her wheelchair, drew in a deep breath. Sarah helped her to her feet. Elise gripped Sarah's hand tightly, feeling her body's weight pressing onto her legs. Pain, but not unbearable. "Now, slowly let go of my hand." Elise hesitated, then released. She stood, alone, without support. Her heartbeat thundered. "Good," Sarah whispered. "Now, the first step. Just one step." Slowly, Elise looked toward Julian. He stood there, eyes glowing, fixed on her. She inhaled, lifted her right foot. 1 step. Her leg trembled. She nearly fell, but kept her balance. Then a 2nd step. Then a 3rd. Then a 4th. Elise Laurent, who had once believed she would never walk again, was walking. Sarah grinned broadly. Julian covered his face, tears streaming down. Elise reached him, each step unsteady, but strong. She lifted her head, smiling. "Do you see? I did it." Julian said nothing. He only wrapped her in his arms, as if afraid she would vanish. "You did it. You did it," his voice breaking. That afternoon, Julian drove Elise and Piper to Portland Head Light, the most famous lighthouse in Maine, its beam guiding ships lost in the fog. Piper skipped ahead, holding a kite. "Daddy, let's fly it," Julian laughed. "Yes, sweetheart. But first, I need to tell Elise something." Piper winked mischievously and ran to the grassy field. Julian led Elise along the rocky shore. Waves lapped gently below the cliffs, the sea wind threading through her hair. Elise gazed at the horizon, smiling. "It's beautiful. I've never felt so free." Julian stopped, turned to her. "Elise." She looked up. "What is it?" Julian dropped to one knee. Elise froze. He pulled out a small velvet box, opened it. A simple, elegant ring. A pale sapphire, the color of her eyes. "Elise Laurent," his voice trembled. A year ago, I met you in the snow. I thought I was saving you, but the truth is, you saved me. You saved Piper. You gave us a reason to believe in love again. Tears streamed down Elise's cheeks. I don't need you to be perfect. I don't need you to prove anything. I just need you beside me forever. He looked straight into her eyes. Will you marry me? Elise couldn't speak. She only nodded, tears falling freely. Julian smiled, rose, and slid the ring onto her finger. They kissed beneath the sunset, beside the lighthouse, with the sound of waves and Piper's delighted laughter echoing nearby. The wedding was held at Old Port, inside a historic brick warehouse strung with lights and white baby's breath flowers. Simple, warm, intimate. Only their dearest ones. Piper was the little bridesmaid, in a pink dress, basket of flowers in hand, her smile radiant. Elise entered, not in her wheelchair, but on her own legs, each step slow but steady. Julian stood at the end of the aisle, in a gray suit, looking at her as though he were witnessing a miracle. When Elise reached him, he whispered, "You look beautiful." She smiled. "So do you." They held hands. When the minister asked, "Do you take her as your wife, in sickness and in health, in wealth and in poverty?" Julian answered without hesitation, "I do." "And do you take him as your husband?" Elise smiled, looking into his eyes. "I do." They kissed. Applause filled the room. Piper jumped with joy, hugging them both. "Now, we're a real family." And yes, they were. A year later, Elise opened a small art center in Portland, dedicated to disabled children and those from disadvantaged backgrounds. Over 30 children attended the opening day. Mateo was there too, older now, more confident. Elise hadn't known Julian arranged it. The moment Mateo saw her, he ran to her, hugging tightly, sobbing, "Miss Laurent, you're okay. I missed you so much." Elise held him, kissed his head. "I missed you too, Mateo." Very much Mateo's mother, a Mexican woman, clasped Elise's hand, her voice tinged with Spanish lilt. "Thank you. Thank you for giving my son a chance to live. And now, I see you are living again too." "Yes?" Elise nodded, speechless with emotion. She stood before the class, smiling. "You know, there was a time I thought I had no worth. But then I learned, our worth isn't in what we've lost, but in what we give." She looked out the window. Julian held Piper, both smiling at her. "And today, I want to give you what someone once gave me, hope." Applause rose. Paintbrushes touched color. That night, Elise lay in Julian's arms, listening to the distant sea. "You know," she whispered, "there was a night I sat beneath that pine tree, thinking it was the end." Julian kissed her forehead, but it was only the beginning. Elise smiled. "Yes, the beginning of everything." She turned to him, eyes soft. "Thank you for never giving up on me." Julian answered gently, "I will never give up on you. Never." They kissed in the warm dark, moonlight spilling through the window. One winter afternoon, 5 years later, snow fell softly over Portland, Maine. But this time, no cold, no despair. Elise stood in the front yard, holding Piper's hand. Now 12, tall and confident. Beside them, a 4-year-old boy, blonde hair, brown eyes like his father's. "Mom," Piper called, "my little brother wants to play in the snow." Elise smiled. "Then let's go." Julian stepped onto the porch, wrapped his arms around his wife from behind, kissed her cheek. "Are you happy?" he whispered. Elise turned, smiling. "Happier than I ever thought I deserved." And as the family stepped into the yard, laughing, building a snowman, Elise Laurent, once ready to die alone in the ice, realized sometimes the end is just the universe's way of leading us to a new beginning. And that beginning was worth more than everything she had lost. If this story touched your heart, made you smile, or shed a tear, please subscribe and turn on notifications to support us in bringing you more moving tales like this. Because, even in the coldest winters, flowers can still bloom. Comment below. If you were in Julian's place, what would you have done? Thank you for listening. See you in the next story.